Okay, we are getting close to the holidays, so happy everything, anything, everything, whatever to you all. And this is Bob Coppage, and I'm joined by a smart person, aka Adam Evans, and we'll get into the whole specifics on the introduction. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about your Security Model 22. And this is going to be about a 35-minute presentation, and then we're going to open it up for conversations and the like. And as always, please feel free to interact with any text, chat, anything along those lines. But then at the end, we'll open it up for microphones, and we want to have conversation and the like. So, and we are recording this. The first part, the presentation part, will go up on YouTube probably by the end of the week. The rest of it, the conversation, we keep that one between ourselves. So moving on. So what we're going to try to do here is we're really going to try to go across four main points. And those four main points is, first of all, and cybersecurity presentations are a dime a dozen. Cybersecurity solutions are a dime a dozen. And some cases it's worth a dime, some cases it's not, whatever. We're going to be pretty much on a very 30,000-foot view here. So we're going to talk about how cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue, because I think in a lot of cases, in conversations, we kind of leave it as if it is. And we're also going to talk about, and we're going to share some tools about how to manage your status quo. So we're kind of talking to you as if you were either the IT support person for an organization or management for an organization, and that organization being small to medium businesses. So that's kind of our approach to this. I understand there's probably going to be some managed service providers here as well. Absolutely welcome here, and feel free to join in at on the second half of the conversation. So, but we're going to talk about your status quo, how to kind of take a look at your organization's cybersecurity status, and then we're going to talk a little bit about multi-factor authentication and cybersecurity, and cyber insurance, because that is a big topic with a lot of our clients, a lot of other organizations. And then finally, what are the next steps that you should be taking? Okay. Now, is this for you? First of all, this is not a cybersecurity in-depth kind of program here. All right. So also, if you're already working on a formal cybersecurity plan, this may be, hopefully you've already done some of these things, or you have a different method or model or framework to go by. So absolutely, if you're doing something that's good, strong, healthy, moving forward in security, then this isn't really as critical for you. But if you don't have a great view of where you are and where you're trying to go, what to do next, then hopefully this is going to be useful for you. Okay. So, and you'll notice if you'll see some standards on some slides that we do. What can we do to help you get a good feel for where you are right now from a cybersecurity standpoint? And if you had some marching orders in terms of getting ready for cyber insurance now, and when I say getting ready for cyber insurance, that includes renewals of programs. And also, we're going to try to give you the beginnings of a plan of what are some of the next steps you can do. And we would love, what a shock, we would love it if you worked with Simplex IT, but work with somebody, to move forward. We're not all experts on everything. So who are we? Adam, I'm going to let you introduce yourself here. This is Adam.
Hi, as you may have heard, I'm Adam.
Okay,
yeah, slight difference in how I look now compared to the picture, because COVID happened, and I decided that, yeah, we're gonna go for the caveman rock star look and just grow the hair out and everything. So, but I kind of lead security efforts over here at Simplex as our security czar, plus a handful of other items. But I'm kind of looking over organizations, their posture, what we can do to improve, and how we can help. And keeping up to date on those changes and trends, as those that got here a little bit earlier heard Bob and I talking about a little bit. But otherwise, I've been in the managed service provider industry for longer than I'd like to remember. But it's all been good fun, and genuinely enjoy helping businesses improve, be better, and be more secure.
And those of you who've been seeing some of the presentation, I went through my COVID hair stage. So, which my wife still is not crazy that I went through. Anyway, I'm the CEO, Simplex IT. We'll talk a little bit about us towards the end. Author of a few books, and really, we're here to help. So, enough of that. So, why are we talking about this particular topic in this particular way? Is one thing that I think we're finally starting to get an understanding on from a societal standpoint is the bad guys are entrepreneurs, meaning they are finding ways to make money, however you want to define money, whether it's an acquisition of power, acquisition of wealth, whatever, but they are finding ways to exploit cybersecurity weaknesses and to make a good dime doing it. And as long as that business model is there, they're going to continue to find new ways to exploit weaknesses and to make money out of doing it. And which leads us to the second, you're seeing more and more requirements for compliance purposes. And we'll touch on compliance, but it's not a big form of our topic here. But is essentially where requirements, we got a mic going. And essentially where we want to basically, or where organizations are saying you have to have these types of security requirements in place. And then cyber insurance changes are happening all over the place.
Yeah, it was actually a guy.
And Adam, if you could, you want to talk a little bit about the most recent issue that's come up?
Yeah, so I mean, this really builds off the bad guys as entrepreneurs point, because as we've seen over the last year, is there's been a rise in ransomware and a whole bunch of other nastiness. But the big thing that's really hit, and I'm sure a lot of people are getting these emails is from vendors, is emails saying that they were not affected by this thing called Log4j or Log4j. And that's a vulnerability within Java and certain aspects of Java. I can bore you with the technical details, so I'll spare that for another time. If you have questions, reach out. But it's particularly nasty, easy to exploit, high impact, and it's very widespread. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of talk about right now, and has been really occupying a lot of my time over the last week to make sure we're protected, our vendors are protected, and our clients are protected.
And this is part of the challenge here, isn't it? Where the bad guys, when they find these types of exploitation opportunities, it's money in the bank for them to basically take advantage of it for whatever purposes down the road. Cool. Okay, so let's move into this, shall we? So those of you who know me, you know I always do caveats. Caveats here, this is for small to medium organizations, okay? And this is also, it's again, as we talked about earlier, this is for organizations that do not have a security strategy fleshed out, or it's a way to kind of test your cybersecurity strategy. This also does not deal directly or specifically with any kind of compliance requirements. All right, and this only is representing a starting point or getting a feel for where where you're going to go from this point onwards. So take all that with grains of salt. Okay. And our 4 discovery points. Again, cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue. Some tools for you to discover what your status quo, where your organization currently is on a cybersecurity standpoint. Again, we're going to talk about MFA, multi-factor authentication, and cyber insurance, and then your next steps. Okay. And Adam, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So basic tenets of cybersecurity, because as Bob mentioned, cybersecurity is more than just an IT issue. One of the core guidelines and tenets of cybersecurity is what's called the CIA triad. Not because the CIA invented it, but because it's the abbreviation and we all love those. But it's really confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. So confidentiality simply boils down to is that it has that limited availability. Basically, the people that need access to the data have access and no one else has access to it. Think your HR files. HR needs it, the rest of the company does not. Then we get into integrity. That is the aspect of making sure that data is only modifiable by those who should be able to modify that data, and that the data itself is trustworthy. Think your banking records. You have to trust that the records and information you receive from your bank is true and trustworthy. If it's not, that risks the security and integrity of that data. And lastly, availability. That's simple. It's just data is available when it's needed. I always tell people, and those that have talked to me before have heard this plenty of times, if you want a system that's 100% secure, we can do that. We'll plug every single port on it, lock it in a safe, wrap some chains around it, lock it up, and put it in the bottom of a lake. Very secure that way, not very available. So these kind of three tenets really help guide what information security program should look like, and kind of give those items for consideration of in that give and take between each one. And that's really our guiding principles here.
And the nice thing about this is that it's very pedestrian. Okay, this is something that, confidentiality, only the people who are supposed to see it can see it. Integrity, you can rely on the data to be accurate, and then you can access it when you need it. If you really think about your cybersecurity strategies, and you think about some of the things that you're doing and all that, they should be dealing with one or all of these aspects of how you deal with your data. And so this can kind of help you figure out whether your time is wasted, your money's wasted, and or whether or not, no, this is something you really should be looking at. So I like this model. It's very straightforward and it's very commonsensical. So now we get back into that whole, it's not just an IT issue. And this is one where I'll start on this one. Then Adam, I want you to basically correct me when I'm wrong, because we know it's going to happen. It starts with management. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of cases, and this was actually part of my first book, CEO Survival Guide to Information Technology, shameless plug, where management sometimes abdicates aspects of IT to the geeks, to the tech. You guys handle it. It's your job. You do it, yada, yada, yada. And I get that. But management has to understand that cybersecurity is important and that there needs to be a strategy there. If management is not behind that, you are in for a world of hurt. And this is one where when we talk to some of our new clients, thankfully, I've noticed a lot more acceptance of that responsibility in 2021 than we've seen in prior years, but it's still an issue. And that's the one takeaway I wanted to have. Adam, do you want to talk about some of the other stuff, or
Yeah,
add on to this point?
Yeah, and I mean, adding on to the point here, at the end of the day, security, you've got a lot of risk acceptance and risk aversion and all the fun stuff. I could just keep throwing adjectives against the word risk. But at the end of the day, someone has to take ownership of that risk. And it starts at the top, specifically with the owner and stakeholders at that level, and then cascading down. So the owners and management need to be involved with that. So they first off know the risk that's being accepted, and know that when that risk is accepted, what's in place to mitigate around that. But because this all includes the entire organization, from HR, finance, the rank and file, frontline workers, it can't just be a thing where IT is told, go make us secure. Because it's more than just checking boxes and updating configs on a computer. It's people issues too. And that leads into building that security aware culture. This isn't necessarily everyone there knows exactly what to look for in the latest phishing email and how malware works and everything. But it's simple things like, is this person supposed to be doing what they're doing? Why is someone from, one of the team leads that may be in a production environment, why are they at a finance computer or HR computer? Or if you've got controlled physical security and access points like that, where people are only allowed through certain entrances, are people holding the door open for complete strangers? I've listened to a lot of security podcasts with people that do all these physical security assessments and everything. And the simplest way they get into an environment is they smile and say hello when someone holds the door. But all this stuff is great, but it needs to be formal. You got to have those plans, those processes, those checklists, those documentation items. You need the people that need to have access to them and be aware of them, your team leads in different departments. they need to be aware of those, and those need to be kept up to date. Like I said, with that Java vulnerability, this stuff changes all the time. This time last week, yeah, Java, we all knew about it, and it's got its issues and pluses and minuses. And then Friday happened, and the security industry had an aneurysm. So yeah, it's always going to change, and people need to stay up to date on it, and those changes need to be brought down through the organization to keep everyone secure in a way that's digestible.
Cool. So one of the things that we try to do is we talk about your status quo. And this is one of the tools. And by the way, what we're showing you right now, these are tools that we're developing or we're using, that were developed, whatever, that are helping us. And we're just at the point where we're going to start releasing this with our internal clients and our potential clients. But we wanted to go over this with you folks here. Is we really just pulled out this questionnaire, and I will go ahead and bring it up. And Adam, you want to talk about what this basically is?
Yeah, absolutely. So security, as complex as it is, one of our things we try to do is kind of simplify that, not by making it super easy, but by getting down to the core nuts and bolts of what we need to do. So we've looked at these items here and started going down a road of keeping that CIA triad, while also looking at industry standard frameworks. I'd list them all, but it would just sound like alphabet soup, because again, everyone in the IT industry loves our abbreviations. But these are guidelines and best practices from organizations like the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Administration, the Center for Information Security, as well as other things like your payment processing standards and the like. And trying to take the core objectives of those that have a direct impact on a business's operations and whether it creates risk or not, and boiling it down to yes or no questions. And if the answer is yes on these items, then hey, we're moving stuff in the right direction. If the answer is no, then maybe we should take a look at those items and see what we can do to improve. Things like a disaster recovery plan. I'm sure everyone out there thinks, well, if the worst case scenario happens, yeah, I can think through some things of what to do. But is that documented? Is that planned out? Are the stakeholders aware of that? And has it been reviewed and updated? Questions like that. Things like, are you aware of compliance obligations that need to be taken care of? Are you doing these regular risk assessments and penetration tests, and making sure that you understand the security implications around your organization? Are you training? Notice everything Bob has on the screen here isn't a technical item. It's a business process. I could list technical stuff all day, but at the end of the day, these are the important things that make a good impact on the business. And to what Brent said over in chat just now, yeah, pretty much a plan of action milestones taken right from the NIST frameworks and the CMMC frameworks. Just tailored a little bit more to be less focused on those compliance obligations and more open. We can take these things, update them on our end, keep it up to date and track it with our clients, and try to move the needle a little bit more. And it can apply to companies that don't have those formal requirements, and even those that do, because it's designed to support those. Obviously, if a business is bound by a superseding obligation, that's what we go with, because compliance is important. But there are plenty that may or may not. Bob, is there anything you want to add on it?
Yeah, Bill, you asked about slides and replay. This part of the presentation that will be put up on YouTube by the end of the week. And if you want to get a copy of the slides, just reach out. There's an email address at the end of this thing. Reach out, and we'll make that stuff available. And Brent, yeah, you had to get the acronym out there, didn't you? You just had to throw one out. So, but if you take a look at this, and I've said this before, I've been a CIO, network admin, developer. I've worn all the hats. I'm becoming less and less of a tech and more of a CEO, management, and the like. But what I like about this type of form here is it just very simply says, do you have this? Do you have this documented? Do you have this piece already written or in place? It has been accepted as this is a good thing to have. And we'll get into some of the, how do you prioritize these things and the like. But it is fairly straightforward. Now, it doesn't get into some of the quality questions as far as, you know, if your disaster recovery plan is, you know, say goodbye to your friends, that's not necessarily a great plan, but at least we've got the yes, it's in place. And there's some comments there that you can add as well. Okay. So this is a good, and Adam, about how long would you say it would take a company to go through this type of process if they had access to the people who knew what was in place?
Right. Well, I'll throw out the caveats out there. It depends on organizational size and complexity, but it's designed not to take too long. You know, you go through yes, no questions and can be conducted in an interview format. For clients and opportunities where we may look at wanting to get a little bit more insight, you know, we can attach additional evidence items like copies of those documents, screenshots of configurations, etc. But all designed around how do we make this simple, straightforward, but still give very good results that we can take back and work with an organization to say, let's make you more secure, and here's the top priority items, and here's what you can do from the organizational side, and what management needs to take ownership of and execute, and what IT can take care of on their side of stuff.
Cool.
I think if I were to assign timeframes for the average small medium business out there, interview format shouldn't take more than a couple hours.
And the other thing I would say is that if you don't know, and you're management and you don't know the answer to these questions, you got another issue. Something out, there's another thing that you got to take a look at, whether it be a disconnect from the people who are providing these services or a disconnect from you not being part of that process from a management standpoint or the like. So cool. And I think we've got about 34 different items on our worksheet. Is that about right? About 30 some?
Yeah, and it's constantly growing as we're, because as Bob said, it's kind of a little bit more of a work in progress. And we're still updating, adding some stuff and refining as, especially in the last year or so, as executive orders have come out and all the funsy bits in there. But yeah, there's a bit there, and we're constantly adding more as it makes sense, while still keeping the CIA triad that we mentioned earlier. And does the answer for these questions have a direct impact on an organization's security, including you know, business operations? These questions aren't designed around, are we just checking a box to check a box because checking the box makes you secure? It's, are we trying to prevent risk in the organization and make the company stronger as a result?
Cool. Then the next tool I wanted to talk about, and actually we're allowed to because we participated in some stuff, but this is actually a form that was created by one of the vendors in the industry, and it's basically just called Common Sense Cybersecurity. And this is, let's see, let me bring it up here. Very simply put, this is where we start talking about the tools. And this is where we essentially take a look at the things that technology brings to bear as far as some of the defensive either strategies or applications or products or the like. And you literally just go in and you check off the ones that you've got. And you've got this traditional magic quadrant thing, which essentially is showing up here. The cheapest are to the right, the most expensive are to the left, however you want to define monetary costs and the like, and then the level of impact, how meaningful in terms of making your organization more secure in this. And the nice thing here is you can essentially, again, go through this with someone who knows what you've got as far as strategies and the like, and cross out what you are currently have implemented. And then what's left? These are the things you may potentially need. Adam, you got?
I mean, the only other thing I could possibly add here is, even if some of these things are in place, as the world's changed, it could also be used as a good review tool. You know, set those priorities at the business level, what matters, and then that can be used internally, externally with third parties of, let's say, I'm concerned about this. What's our organization status and our posture here? Is this up to snuff with the industry and what's changed over the years? Or do we need to make improvements?
Yeah, so you may find, for example, strong Wi-Fi security. Your organization may not offer Wi-Fi. or the like, or there may be some aspect of your organization where some of these things aren't as appropriate, aren't as needed. If everything you're doing is cloud-based through a third party, it's more the third party data backups you need to be concerned about than yours and the like. So on all of these, there's a certain, you have to take a certain grain of salt, and not every organization is going to have the same level of prioritization as another. A manufacturing organization where a majority of the workforce has to be on site and has to be in place there and the like is going to have a different footprint when it comes to remote access than an organization that has, a work from anywhere or succeed from anywhere workforce. So take this all with a grain of salt, but this is because what ends up happening is you take a look at whatever's remaining and you look at the lowest cost, highest impact, and there's your priorities. Those are the things you want to take care of sooner rather than later. So Brent's comment, and yeah, this is one where we can actually talk about this from the bad practices and the like. So his comment about what are the realistic timeframe for resolution of issues discovered. That is such an open can of worms, because we're going through this discovery process, and we're doing this, and especially in the manufacturing side, where we end up with technologies that are obsolete, but very applicable for their operations. So in other words, the example I always use is you have a machine that's out on the shop floor that costs $150,000 to replace, and it will only work when it's plugged into a Windows XP or Windows 7 box, and it has to then connect to the network to share the data. But it has that requirement. Well, it's going to be hard to justify to the manufacturing company to replace a $150,000 machine. So what do we do? And I'll throw it over to Adam, because we've had to deal with that several times.
Yes. So, in those situations, you first look at your guiding frameworks of compliance. Is the item a compliance issue and a liability? Once we get into some of the other stuff, a little bit later, there's the bad practices out there, and is it violating it? In a lot of cases with some of this end of life stuff, absolutely it is. So then you look at that business case is, okay, well, yeah, as Bob said, it costs 150 grand to upgrade the machine to something newer, later, greater, etc. Well, what can we do to mitigate that threat? In some instances, and when we get into the techie stuff, there's 1.5 million solutions. I'll try to keep it as simple and quick as possible. But what can we do to isolate it on the network and make sure it only has access to the internal resources as necessary? And that gets into that confidentiality and integrity and principles of least access, all the funsy bits there. But how can we lock it down while still allowing business processes, while also keeping the bad guys out and finding that give and take balance? Depending on the organization, the compliance frameworks, you might not have a lot of options. Some organizations may simply need to be told, you have to do it this way. Other ones that may be more flexible, it could be something as, well, why don't we just, build a VLAN, and I don't want to speak techie, so I'm going to keep it short. Maybe put on, do some stuff with VLANs and subnets and all that stuff, restrict the network access and all the other technical fun stuff around it. But at the end of the day, this gets back to that management point from earlier. IT has to be able to go to management and say, here's the risk, here's the mitigation, here's the risk that remains. Business leadership, is this an acceptable risk? And then you take those items and you put it into that formal documentation, like put it into your incident response plan. What happens if shop computer ABC does become vulnerable to a new thing that's really nasty? What do we do about it? And in that same vein, because the hardware is likely old, what happens if the hardware fails and that machine's no longer available? What's the risk to business processes there? What's the backup process for it, the recovery process, etc.?
And let's focus a little bit on this. And Brent, the question is, when you talk about, is it legal to do the XP? I'm assuming you're saying, is that a legitimate strategy? There are many legitimate strategies, and all of them suck by certain definitions and succeed by other definitions. And it kind of depends on what you can or can't get away with in terms of, for the device, the machine, the application, all that, to still deliver the appropriate goods and service to the organization. But Adam is spot on, which pains me no end. to say this, but he's spot on when we talk about risk management and risk acceptance on the part of management. Because management has to understand that there is that risk. And there's a difference between that old obsolete XP box or whatever software or hardware that's out there, because it is the only way we can deliver that value to the organization. There's a difference between that scenario and we have a really, really old computer, but we don't want to upgrade it. You know, because in the first case, we're basically saying, look, it's going to cost unreasonable hardship on the organization to replace all of the equipment necessary. Whereas in the second case, it's we don't want to a certain degree. And I realize times are hard and it is expensive to replace workstations, but it is a cost of doing business to have hardware that is at least somewhat secure. Adam, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, there's also a cost of not doing it too. I don't want to go and be all gloom and doom, but if something happens, incident response costs are not cheap. And if it's a really nasty thing, especially if customer data is exposed, it opens up a lot of legal liability and a lot of other nastiness out there, insurance claims, all the fun stuff around that. Long story short, that gets back to the risk acceptance. Is the risk, worth the cost and all that other stuff? As Bob mentioned, specific certain use computers, it may not be. Your entire, HR department that's still running Windows 7, it's probably about time for an upgrade. And yeah, it's going to be a little expensive, but it needs to happen.
Cool. Some additional points. Want to make sure you're aware that these are assessment, not audit tools. And it doesn't measure the quality. So you could have some of these tools in place, you could have some of these documentations in place, but if the tools aren't monitored, they're not managed, they're not configured properly, you could have the most secure front door in your building, but if it's propped open by a cinder block, not doing a great job. Same thing if your documents have not been updated or you got a boilerplate copy of them off of Google somewhere, and you've never configured them to be part of your organization, you've never communicated it to the rest of your organization, that's not a great way to approach it. And then this is a real quick website document. Adam, you want to spend 2 seconds on that?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and pull it up real quick. So for those that don't know, CISA is a subdivision of the, or CISA, I've heard it pronounced both ways, is a subdivision of the Department of Homeland Security, and they're in charge of cybersecurity infrastructure, all that fun stuff. And they've taken it upon themselves to publish a list of particularly bad practices. And these are the things that they've looked at that has really come up to bite a lot of companies in the butt over the years that really need to be stamped out. And these are things like use of unsupported or end-of-life software in the service of critical infrastructure. Those would be exactly your Windows XP devices or your version of an ERP that, just hasn't been upgraded in the last 5 years, but, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Those kind of deals and identifying, they're end of life, that's bad. They're not getting security updates, that's a problem. Their other one here is use of known fixed default passwords and credentials in service of infrastructure. It's great that you have that server out there and that those new switches that you got, but are the passwords still admin? Because I can tell you one of the first things the bad guy is going to guess to try to get in there and get that foothold. And lastly, and this is the newest one that's been added recently, is the use of single-factor authentication especially for remote administrative access to systems. You look at the big ransomware attacks that have happened recently, especially against government and infrastructure industries. The bad guys found their way in, usually by finding an entry point that did not have multi-factor authentication in place. And as we're going to get into later, multi-factor authentication is becoming more and more important. And when you get that in place, the benefits start becoming more apparent, especially to the techie people on the call. A quick anecdote on that too. We have a client that we just was able to do some changes to and get their multi-factor into a lot better health and status. And one of the things we started noticing immediately after we did that was the events and telemetry coming out saying that a bad guy did try to get into this account and the password was something that the bad guy found and figured out. But the multi-factor killed it on the spot because they could not proceed without enforcing that multi-factor element. And that's great when it's at the end user level, but it's even more critical for those administrative accounts out there. because once an admin account's hit, the damage is bad, to put it simply.
Cool. So I know we're running out of time here, so we're going to move on quickly. One of the things also that's happening is cyber insurance, and cyber insurance has gone under significant changes in this past year, and it's really been on two levels. One is on what requirements insurance companies have before they'll even give you the policy, and then the fine print in what you have to go through or prove before they'll pay a claim. And in both cases, the bar is becoming higher and higher for organizations, and that's because they've had to pay out a huge amount of money. And so this is one of the sample questionnaires that we've had to deal with several times. There's one particular cyber insurance company that has been going through this a lot, but it's not unusual at all. And I think we've done like at least half a dozen or so, or it seems like it.
Yep, and the next one, I've got my kickoff meeting for that scheduled once we're done. So.
Yep. But essentially, multi-factor authentication is one of the most effective deterrents to most, especially on the ransomware side. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a solve everything. But more and more companies, more and more cyber insurance companies are including MFA requirements. In this particular case, and those of you that are techie guys, you can read this. And you see down to what layer they're going. Not every insurance is going all the way down to here where you have to have multi-factor authentication in order to actually go after networking devices, but it's getting there. And the fine print is getting finer. Rates are going significantly. And again, this is a sample requirement. So, but there's a reason for this. So even if you don't have cyber insurance, and by the way, you will in a couple of years, if you don't have cyber insurance still, there's a reason they're asking for multi-factor authentication. Is by far and away the most effective. And if you're using Microsoft 365 or the like, the licensing's included. It's not asking you to pay any more money. So here's your next steps. The first one is what I call the mirror test. And that is really a question, and it's about both internal IT as well as management, corporate management for the organization. Are you taking this seriously enough for the organization? Take a moment and just reflect. If you went to your coworkers, your peers, your direct reports, and you said, how seriously do you think I'm taking cybersecurity? Do you think they would say very without trying to just give you lip service? Do you think that they would understand and recognize how seriously you're taking it? Okay, how often, how frequently do you communicate the requirements? How much time do you spend understanding the requirements? Okay. The second is the assessment process. If you already don't have something underway, use the tools we've got. There's other tools that are available, whatever, but use these to start assessing where you are in terms of cybersecurity. How seriously are you implementing these things? Are you taking these next steps? And then finally is reach out. Yes, we're here. Yes, we're selling our services, all of that kind of fun stuff. Bottom line is we can help. We can help move forward. We're not looking to sell you anything during this call, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But reach out to somebody. And absolutely start moving forward on this in 22, because if you don't, who will? So, any other comments on that one, Adam?
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, the mirror test aspect. I mean, because Bob, you mentioned there may be some of our peers in the group too. It's worth that introspection into those organizations too, because the risk and the landscape's changing for companies like ourselves. And those assessment processes too. I mean, even if you're in a good, you feel that everything's taken care of, you feel you've passed the mirror test, validate and verify. We all know that things change in technology. We all know that things change in business, especially since the pandemic happened and I started growing my hair out. Are the documents in the incident response processes still up to date? Or do they have the system admin that left the company 5 years ago when he retired? I'm still on the document with a cell phone number. And as Bob said, you don't have to do this stuff alone. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to somebody. The key is reach out.
Yep. Cool. So just to review what we've talked about. We've talked about the whole, what your status, that it's not just an IT issue, what your status quo is. Talked about insurance, what your next steps are. And we've talked about this at other webinars and the like, but cybersecurity is not just an IT issue. It's not going away. If you are the internal IT person, part of your mirror test is, are you effectively communicating the importance of cybersecurity to your boss, CFO, COO, CEO, whatever? And it's not going away. It's what I call an infinite game. It is going to continue to change. It is going to continue to dynamically expand. Every time somebody comes out with a new way to use technology, the bad guys are going to come up with a new way to use it for nefarious purposes. So the next question is, how can we help? For those of you who are expecting a sales pitch, I don't want to disappoint you, so here we go. So what we're offering is very simple, just a 30-minute virtual meeting. It'll be with myself and or Adam, and we're just going to talk about your current status quo for cybersecurity within your organization. We're going to talk about your expectations of 22, get you started with the tools that we just talked about today, and we'll answer any questions you have about your unique situation. Okay? You'll notice not a huge sales pitch. We actually want to help you launch to get started with it. So this is not just here's 2 documents, go have fun. We'll get you started with them. At the end of it, we want you to have better starting points than what you've got right here, the template documents to get you started. And I'll send you a copy of CEO's Survival Guide to Information Technology, and or I don't want your job as co-managed IT services the right fit for you. So you'll get some things that you can level wobbly tables with.
They're really good at that, by the way.
They really do. They wobble. And at the end of the meeting, we'll talk about what role, if any, Simplex IT can have with you. And we'll introduce our SIMS 22, which is our model offering for next year, whether it be from a pure MSP standpoint, where we are your IT resource, or commits, where we partner with your internal IT, or with you if you're the internal IT. Either way, it works fine with us. And here's the thing, though. If it's a good fit, we'll explore it further. And if not, we part friends. Boy, that's a $750 value. Wait, what? So if you book a consultation, it's free. And just email me. Bill, this gets back to the information getting to you. Just email me, bobc@simplex-it.com, and we'll get you the information. And I just want to be real clear here. There's not going to be any sales pitch except for the last discovery point, only if it makes sense. And if it's not useful to you, we'll donate $50 to a charity of your choice. And honestly, again, we talk about our peer managed IT services, our co-managed IT services, and we would love to get some feedback from you using the same email address, bobc@simplex-it.com. And that is pretty much it for this presentation. We're going to stick around here again to open up mics and comments for everybody. But before we go, Adam, I want to thank you for your help and so we actually made sense instead of me just talking. But thanks for that.
Yeah, and thanks for being there, so I didn't go down those weird technical rabbit holes about NIST 800, 171, Control 3.
You're starting.
Yeah, that.
And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And thus endeth the part that will end up on YouTube.